Okay, so the July meeting of the Bristol Planning Commission, we're on record and all that good stuff. Okay. So this is the July meeting of the Bristol Planning Commission. It is 7:03, and I'll call the meeting to order. The next item of business is to review the agenda for any additions, removals, or changes. I have none. Does anybody have any? Okay, we'll move on to public comment. I don't believe we even have any, we do have public, technically public. It is a co-regional planning commission member that's with us tonight.
Yeah, with no comment.
Okay, we will move on then to new business. First item is a discussion with Adam Luigi. Thank you for coming and sharing with us.
Thank you for having me, and I apologize for missing your meeting in June.
No, we had a rather
signals crossed.
We had a rather animated meeting in your absence, so.
All right.
So Adam's here to talk about future land use mapping and Act 181.
Okay, great. So in your package, you all had something like this, which is kind of a two-pager. And it's basically a summary of Act 181, which was close to a couple hundred pages. So it's a short summary, but it's where I'm gonna go, and I'm really focusing on basically regional planning and the purpose of the act, and therefore how our mapping fits into it. So Act 181 passed in June 2024. It overhauls Vermont's planning framework. Its purpose is to try and do more coordination between the state, the region, and municipal land use. It's really, and it really focuses on Act 250 jurisdiction as the main tool to do that. So the premise behind it, it was kind of a grand bargain, or it was, has been billed as a grand bargain, is we, as a state, want to do more development in the village, and similar to some of the things we've done here in Bristol over the last few years. So we want to incentivize basically development in the villages. And the way this legislation does that is that it basically takes away Act 250 jurisdiction in villages, at least for housing. So it divides the state up into 3 tiers. Tier 1 has 2 tiers. It's Tier 1A and Tier 1B. Tier 1A, we don't have to spend a lot of time on it because I don't think Bristol will ever do it. That's basically for more of the Burlingtons of the world, where they can basically supplant Act 250. And they have to meet a whole bunch of criteria in order to do that. Tier 1B is something that Bristol could choose to opt into. And I would suggest you probably should. What Tier 1B would do would be allow people to develop housing within your village area. And I would tell you, think of your village planning area, because that's really where we started. They would be exempt if the town of Bristol, so if your select board basically says we want to opt in to Tier 1B, and they need to make that decision by December 31st, 2026. So they've got some time. Basically, then someone could develop up to 50 units of housing within the village of Bristol and be exempt from the Act 250 process. So it's your choice. You can opt in or not, but that's the incentive to get people to develop housing within the basically within your village area. I will tell you right now, in the interim period while this rule is going into effect, because Bristol has a designated downtown, basically that designated downtown area and a half-mile circle around it are already exempt for housing under Act 250. And they will stay that way basically through when the exemption period ends, which is basically January 1st, 2027.
Can you expand on exempt for how exempt, I mean, anything goes, or is that what you're saying? Or-
I'm saying, no, this legislation really did not impact Bristol's zoning. So whatever someone has to do, they'll have to go through the municipal permitting level, so they'll have to go through your zoning.
Exempt from any Act 250 stuff. Okay.
But yes, if their development is within basically the exempt area, then for housing, not necessarily for other commercial development, but for housing, they would be exempt.
Got it.
Until?
The interim exemption goes through December 31st, 2026. And at that point, which is why I say that Bristol should make a decision on the more permanent 1B status. Do they want to be in or do they want to be out by January 1st, 2027? Because that's when the current exemption, the interim exemption ends. Does that make sense?
Well, except then what happens when the exemption ends?
When the exemption ends, Bristol will either have opted in to basically tier 1B status. And it's a simple letter. We want the area as outlined in the regional planning map to be included as tier 1B and therefore exempt from Act 250 jurisdiction for up to 50 units of housing.
Yeah.
Or we don't want to opt into 1B, and basically the current Act 250 jurisdictional thresholds, 10 units of housing, would stay in place. So that's the first half of the bargain. And that's the half that these maps, excuse me, really impact. So I'm going to show you how we created them. And then give you an opportunity to look at them and ask questions. And we don't have to get it all done in this meeting. Basically, it's a draft. We, the Regional Planning Commission, need to make decisions on this map and get it to the Land Use Review Board by December of this year. So I've been asking towns if they can to get back to me and say, yes, this map makes sense to us, or by September of this year. But again, you could make it so it had very little impact on Bristol if you chose not to opt in. The benefit to Bristol or to towns is to develop more housing and to opt in by and offer the opportunity for developing more housing within your village center, or within your village area. The other part of the bargain, so is tier 2, the Act 250 jurisdictional thresholds do not change. And that will be the majority of the town of Bristol. So the jurisdictional thresholds for Act 250 will stay exactly the same as they were before the legislation, with one big exception. And that one big exception is the road rule. So Vermont used to have a road rule that made development subject to Act 250. It went away for a long time. It came back with this piece of legislation. So if someone builds a road greater than 800 feet in length, or a road and driveways greater than 2,000 feet in length, they are automatically subject to Act 250, regardless of what they're trying to build. Okay. So that measure was largely to protect interior forest blocks around the state of Vermont. They figure if you can't build, or if you're subject to Act 250 jurisdiction, if you build a long road, they will be able to protect the natural resources in those large forest blocks. So that's the thought behind that. The other change that it made is on the natural resources side. The state also decided where there are areas of natural resources that are not currently protected, they would make those areas more subject to Act 250 or subject to a lower jurisdictional threshold for Act 250, and that's tier 3. There is a tier 3 working group, and the newly formed land use review board basically will adopt the tier 3 rules. I can tell you, I'm on the working group. I'm one of probably 50 people on the working group, but I'm on the working group. Tier 3 is going to focus largely on rare, threatened, endangered species. Let's see. Significant natural areas classed as S1 or S2, so either very rare or rare. A natural community could be a community of animals, it could be a community of plants. But that's one of the areas that they're proposing to focus it on. Another is headwaters with steep slopes, soils that do not retain water, and above 1200 or higher elevation, so above 1200, whereas right now 2500 is kind of the jurisdictional threshold for headwaters, 2500 feet. So lowering that. And the third one is habitat corridors of statewide significance. So basically places where generally large terrestrial mammals are crossing from one block to another. We're trying to preserve habitat connectivity in the state.
There's an awful lot of them.
Yeah, and there's a lot of forest in the state, 73%. So there are some big areas subject to it, and they're just starting to map it.
So with the New Haven River, say from the Lincoln Road.
Okay.
West.
Mhm.
And down, past the village.
Mhm.
Down to the Lathrop Bridge,
Mhm.
let's say. That sounds like it would be exempt from them considering that a natural resource or whatever the word for it was, because it's not above 15 or 1200 feet.
It would not be a
And-
headwater,
It wouldn't be a headwater.
no. Might there be a lot of wildlife activity in the New Haven River? Absolutely. Would they map it as an area of statewide significance? I do not know yet. They just have some draft maps out. So the land use review board is going to create the tier 3 area. These are the criteria I think that they are going to use. I've seen a first draft. I have not seen the maps that they will use to support it. So I can't tell you exactly where it will be. I can tell you they're not necessarily pulling large forest blocks into tier 3 because they don't want 73% of the state to be subject to tier 3. They want to try and focus it in relatively small areas that have natural resources that are not necessarily protected by A&R permits or some other permitting regime. So I can't tell you where the tier 3 will be in Bristol yet, but you all know Bristol. I've described a little bit of the things that they're looking at. You can probably make better educated guesses about Bristol than I can. Can certainly make better educated guesses about Bristol than I can. So our map does not show tier 3 areas, and it's not necessarily related to tier 3 areas because while a forest block alone is not going to constitute a tier 3 area, it might hold other natural resources species that would pull it into the tier 3 area, but just being a forest block won't do it. And the habitat connectors focuses on the area in between forest blocks as opposed to the forest blocks themselves. And it relies on the road rule largely to protect the interior forest block. Okay, so that's the kind of the big framework of the bill. For our purposes. So I've told you the Regional Planning Commission's map will create the areas where there is the potential for the towns to opt into tier 1 jurisdiction. And otherwise, the other thing that we're doing is basically making a village the same, the definition of a village the same in every town throughout the state. Making the definition of rural general the same, making an enterprise area, the definition of that the same. So we've basically divided the state up into 10 jurisdictional thresholds. I think Bristol has, so I'm gonna say 5 or 6 of them. But not necessarily all of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. So. Let's see, AZ, would you pull up the map set that's it? Yeah, excellent. So how did we go about creating this map? Well, one of the first things we looked at was your zoning. So that's just your current zoning map. And I think you'll be able to see some of the resemblances between that and the planning map that we did. The next thing we looked at was basically your planning areas and our planning areas. So current, future land use areas. Bristol has 3 of them. It's actually one of our easier towns that way. And then the regional future land use areas, and then we get to basically, which mimicked yours. We get to our current future land use land use draft. So the pink area is what we are proposing for your village area for the purposes of future land use. We tied it to parcels. So where some of your village area goes through parcels or dissects parcels, we tied every village area in Addison County to parcels as closely as we could. Because it's going to have the jurisdictional impact for Act 250, we wanted to make it as clear as we could, and that's why we tied it to parcels.
So that pink area,
Yes.
and this is tier 2, I'm thinking.
This is tier 1.
That's the
Tier
tier you
1B.
don't think Bristol would do.
Tier 1B, I think you'll do.
Oh, the tier 1B.
Tier 1B.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
And if we say sure, it increases the level of home building to 50 units.
Someone could build up to 50 units within the village of Bristol without getting an Act 250 permit.
They just have to go through zoning.
They need to go through zoning. They still need their state permits as well. So they'd still need at that level, they'd need a stormwater permit. They'd need a basically
wastewater permit.
Wastewater permit.
Actually, I had a clarifying question for you. With the Act 250 Tier 1B exemption, is there a requirement that it means in order to have the exemption, you have to have septic and town water?
No.
No,
Well, you don't have to have a sewer system and a water system.
Okay.
You have to have soils with the capability to support septic.
Okay.
Which is kind of what Bristol's been all about.
Yeah. I just remember reading something about that, and I couldn't remember if it was Act 181 or some other
It
state.
is Act
The
181.
further
That's
you go
one of the
west, the
criteria
less-
you need.
The less,
Yeah.
further you go west, it depends.
Mhm. Okay.
And we do have a significant former landfill in that pink area, which I would think there would be a keen interest in from someone's part. I don't know, I don't know what you can build on them and what you can't build on them. I know back in the day, you couldn't build anything on an old landfill. We're talking about a landfill that operated for a significant number of years.
Mhm.
And then was loaded up when Casella knew it was gonna not be continued, so
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah, I have 10 solar panels on your landfill.
So that's,
You talking
well, that,
about,
no, I'm not talking
Fred,
about
you're
all
talking
of that.
about that, or
I'm
you're
talking about the
the,
Casella landfill, which is, right there.
on Berkey Road?
It's a large, old landfill that was in operation starting, I think, in 1960, if my memory serves me right.
Mhm.
And it was closed early 2000s. I don't know. It was in
I would say
operation for
before that.
decades. It was in operation for decades.
I don't know how it's capped, and I don't know. I don't know how compatible it is with with housing uses in particular.
I
I
just
don't think it's
raised
something
it,
you could build on
Okay.
because of the constant compaction and settling.
I just raised it because I know.
Hey, if you put some pylons on
And,
the roof,
and that
Yeah.
you would want to be aware of that.
Yep.
With this plan.
It's probably considered a brownfield.
And how much of it, I have no clue. I have no clue.
It almost became a major regional landfill. It would have been a big deal if that had happened.
Well, as it was, they were collecting garbage from quite an area.
It was gonna increase 5 or 10-fold for 10 or 20 years, but it didn't go through.
So,
I have a question.
sure.
Yeah, so if we opt in, do we have any control? Can we limit how many units, or somebody can build 50 and we can't opt in, but then say in this area, we just want 25?
Well, you still control your zoning, so this does not.
Okay,
This does
okay.
not impact Bristol's zoning at all. So, someone might be exempt from Act 250 for housing, but they would still need to get basically a zoning subdivision permit from the town of Bristol, and they would still need to get their other major state permits, so subdivision, sewer, probably stormwater, and then what other site-specific permits they might need.
Right.
So
And
it's not a full
okay.
pass, but it is intended to make things faster. Right, you have one level of review to go through, one maybe. Versus the municipal and the Act 250.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we talked about your village area. And we can go back to it. I'm just gonna run you through the map a little bit, I think. Purple would be enterprise areas. Those are largely commercial areas that are not necessarily associated with housing. So you've got a purple area down there. We took that largely from your zoning. Because that's what you have in that area.
But not the commercial district, right?
We did not take the entire commercial district. A lot of it ended up in your village area because it is. So we used your plan first and your zoning second.
looks like this is the A. Johnson parcel.
Yep.
Yeah.
There should be more than just that, I would suspect, but
That's all it appears to be.
Yeah.
okay. And then the other three, basically areas that we included in Bristol are rural general. So it's generally smaller lots with households on it. That's the gold. Those correspond relatively closely with your 2-acre districts. They're not perfect, but they, like I said, they correspond relatively closely. The teal green is ag and forestry. So you can see the black dots that overlay that teal green. Those are the parcels in Bristol that are in the current use program, either for agriculture or for forestry. So we looked at ortho photos. Did it look like a farm field? Did it look like a forest? We used the current use. If it was in the current use, we recognize that people can take it out of the current use. They can still build houses there. But right now it's primary, we assumed that its primary use is either ag or forestry. And then the rural conservation, again, it's not a prohibition on building houses, but it's more forested parcels that we do not know of being in active forestry a lot, and a fair amount of it in Bristol is the National Forest.
So, excuse me, like say the very east side of the village there, where we run up into Deer Leap and Hogback Mountain. So I thought that those, I mean, that now, like where those, cause I live up there, that where those bumps come out, that's kind of enters what we call the conservation zone.
It does enter your conservation zone. So, like I said, when we did all of the villages, not just Bristol Village in Addison County, and the methodology says tie it to the parcels. As opposed to creating a boundary like Bristol did with its future land use area. So that's what we did. You could say to me, Adam, we'd rather it reflected the current Bristol planning area, village planning area on that, and we'd like you to basically run the boundaries through those parcels. And I think we could justify doing that. So there are guidelines for how we do this, but if you can, if I'm here to take input from you all as the Town of Bristol Planning Commission. And if there are things that you would like to see different, we would like our maps to reflect the interest of the Town of Bristol as closely as we can. Good question. It's an opportunity to comment, and I'd be interested to hear what, the Planning Commission has to say about that specifically.
And this is called rural agriculture and forestry, all this was changed into.
Yes, the teal is rural agriculture and forestry. So the primary uses of those parcels are either agriculture or forestry. The dark green are generally conserved parcels. So some of your Green Mountain National Forest. They're wetlands over 5 acres. So the ones that kind of look like, I'll say, blobs up in the northwest part of town, those are wetlands. I think around Bristol Pond, that area is conserved. So that reflects that.
Little housing in the east side.
Yep.
Bristol Pond.
Yep.
And the black dots, so 87% of that designation, people have put it into land use.
Into the current use program, yeah.
And remind me, in order for someone to build on that and change what is involved and what penalties are there.
They would have to remove whatever piece they want to build on, 1 acre, 2 acres, whatever it is. They would have to remove that from the current use program. They would pay, I think it's a 10% penalty.
10% of
the
value of the land?
The value of the land removed, not the total parcel. And I'm not exactly sure of that. I should probably
Well, I was just curious.
Yeah,
I would guess a lot of Addison County looks like that.
a lot of Addison County looks like that.
Land
There's
use is popular because it's reduces the property tax.
correct. Yes.
And the property tax, of course, would go up for those people that chose to remove it.
Yes. Correct.
So it takes pretty good motivation to do that.
Yes, you're gonna have to think, you're gonna get more value out of the house that you put there than what you were saving from having it enrolled. So it may be a financial decision. It might be a you know, a personal decision. I want a place for my kid to live.
And none of the pink area, as far as you're aware, has land use associated with it, like on the Plank Road there, or even
It's-
on the edge of Burpee Road or so.
It may. But we, when we designated the village, kind of that, we did not necessarily take it as much into account.
Right.
Because the purpose of the village area largely is to pick a place to incentivize housing growth. Fortunately, with the town of Bristol, I feel like we've been through this exercise pretty recently. So I think, you know, I'm pretty confident that this map reflects your needs, but there are places where you have a lot more local knowledge than I do. And so I'm here to basically hear what you think about it and what else you would like to see reflected there, and to answer any questions that you have.
So what are the consequences of this?
So basically, this map will largely be, it'll be the future land use map for the Regional Planning Commission. It's not necessarily yours. Its biggest purpose are the Act 250 jurisdictional purposes that I just spoke to you about.
Yeah.
You know.
My concern is that this is the first step in state zoning land use applications. That, especially with the standardization across everything, that this is that what you're trading off if you enroll in the 1B tier, opt in? What are the requirements for that?
The requirements to opt in are basically that your select board writes a letter to the land use review board and says, we've reviewed the Regional Planning Commission's future land use map. It identifies the village area, it identifies a village area in the town of Bristol. We would like to opt that village area into tier 1B. And then
Here's
basically,
Adam talking to the Bristol Planning Commission right now, live.
Oh,
Wait,
so that would extend basically the jurisdictional exemption to the village area, the 1B area for the town of Bristol. It doesn't change your zoning.
Okay, there's no other requirements. A lot of times you can opt in, but you know, there's
Well, the requirements.
you have to do something else to be able to opt in.
So the requirements to opt into tier 1B are, one, the select board makes the decisions, but two, so we looked at, you have to have basically access to water, access to soils that can support sewer. You have to demonstrate an administrative capacity, which, you know, Bristol will say, yes, we have a planning commission, we have a zoning administrator, we have the ability to administer our zoning regulations and enforce the rules. That's largely it. I mean, right now, like I said, there's an interim exemption that's probably a little bigger than this. Because it's a half-acre bubble around, and it's around the designated downtown.
I think that, has anybody else got any questions on that? So I think to follow on with Rob's, I'm seeing this map rather simplistic. The zones or the districts, if you will, are rather simplified. So it sounds to me like regional planning is going to come up with some unified, simpler districts, if you will, that are on this map, which are not consistent with our zoning districts. So all of a sudden you got two different systems, if you will. And is there anything down the road, or if there's any advantage to start changing what we're accustomed to for districts to whatever the regional planning in the state's gonna look at.
So I wouldn't necessarily, we used your zoning districts to inform this map. We also used your future land use area in your plan to inform this map. And I would tell you it's more informed by the future. This isn't zoning. I don't believe it's intended to be zoning. It does impact Act 250 jurisdiction, and to your concern, Rob, the place where there might be friction is as we define our future land use areas, right? In the village, we want to support housing, mixed use development. In the rural general area, which is the gold, we want to support basically largely, I'll call it rural housing, ag forestry uses. In the ag forestry uses, we want them to be primarily used for ag forestry, but housing is available. You know, people can develop housing if they can meet the local zoning regs. We'd probably say the same about the forest conservation districts where it's possible. In the 5 acre wetlands, or the wetlands greater than 5 acres, you're not gonna be able to do it, right? In the national forest, you're not gonna be able to do it. There are some other parcels in there, some of them are probably subject to private conservation easements. So Nature Conservancy or the Land Trust. I will tell you, for the Land Trust conservation easements, if it was conserved for ag and forestry, someone won't be able to build on it, but it's in the teal. It's because the conservation easement was to support ag and forestry, the main use is ag and forestry, and therefore we put it in the teal as opposed to the conservation, the natural resource conservation area. So go ahead.
My concern is just that this is the first step in when we redo our zoning and town plan. You know, one of the last things is, does it conform with the regional plan, right? And so if this is already laid out for Bristol, we would have to make sure it was, anything we did was in line with this. Potentially, as opposed to vice versa, this being in line with ours.
Yeah, we want, well, and that's one of the reasons I'm here, is I want to make this as compatible with the interests of the town of Bristol. Precisely so we don't get into that situation. And again, you can have more than one zoning district in a future land use area. And in fact, Bristol has a lot of different zoning districts in your village district and even outside of it. And I think this recognizes it. I'm a little surprised about the extent of your enterprise area, and I'm not sure why it's not a little bigger given your zoning. Especially kind of south on the southwest side of town. But
There is a little purple dot at the very southwest of the map. And that's the only other like enterprise area. Yeah, the sand pit. Yeah, that's an enterprise.
right, and I'm sure because we knew it, we looked at the ortho photos, we knew it was a sand pit. It's not really, you know, rural general housing. It's not really ag, so that's why it's an enterprise area.
Just getting back to that hogback thing, and that's our conservation. So how would it work if we said, oh, it's pretty important that houses aren't built up there because it's a real wet place and stuff, you know, it needs to be not developed.
Basically right in here.
Yeah,
Up
but
here.
that's saying it could be developed. Your map is saying that we have some kind of conservation through here, right?
If there's a conservation easement on it, it's in the current use program. If there is a conservation easement on it for ag and forestry, we labeled it ag and forestry. But if the easement says you can't build there, then you can't build there.
25 acres or something like.
Well, your zoning, I think, has it at 25
I
acres,
think,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, so you're not gonna get very dense.
No, so that would rule wouldn't be a problem with that being the rule for us, ever.
This doesn't impact your zoning,
Okay.
correct, but it's. Yeah, it doesn't impact your zoning. So someone would have to go through and say, hey, look, I wanna build a house, I've got a 25-acre parcel, and I wanna build a house. You could change your zoning, you collectively could change your zoning.
But like Rob's saying, we're not gonna run into something where at the very end we have to comply with a blah, blah, blah.
You know, I'm not your legislator, so, but,
I mean, this was our future land use mapping now,
right,
and there's only 3 colors, but our zoning is much more diverse than this. And this does not rule our zoning.
Okay.
it influences your zoning, the zoning that you have should. Achieve your future land use is the way
Yeah.
it's supposed to work.
So, one thing I'm hearing is we probably have some I mean, we're not gonna decide tonight, so we
Nope.
probably have some homework to review and debate this map.
Yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. If there are places that you, the town of Bristol, think that you would like us to change it, then I wanna hear that, and, you know, within the guidelines of the methodology that we have to use, if you have a good rationale for it, I'm relatively confident we can.
Was there descriptions and criteria of the different zones included somewhere?
I believe I sent that out to you in your package, it's the methodology.
Alright, maybe I can.
I'll double
May
check
have
that.
just missed it.
If I didn't, send me a note and I will send it out to you.
Yeah, I'll double check that.
Now, I guess,
Oh, John has something to say. And Bill?
oh,
Adam,
shoot. No, go ahead.
this is Bill.
Hey, Bill?
Can I say a couple of words, Kevin?
I couldn't hear you. Bill.
Okay.
Say it again.
Hello, Adam.
Now I can hear you fine.
Good to you. Good to hear.
That order.
Couple Points. One, you mentioned the.
Stay leaning into the mic, Bill. I think that might help.
Thank you.
Hey, Bill, do you think you could type your question into the chat?
Okay.
Thank you.
Of course, maybe also you could consider just dropping out and re-entering, and sometimes that'll clear up the audio.
We just can't hear your question right now, Bill. You're coming in all garbled.
John, did you have a question?
I have 2 questions. One, I think is maybe a quick answer, and the other, I don't know. But first question is, you know, in discussing this and explaining this map here, for example, Bill, you were mentioning, for example, forestry use. Will that remain our definition, Bristol's definition of forestry use, for example, or would the state be passing down a definition of forestry use to us?
For the purposes of this map, the Regional Planning Commission's future land use map, the methodology defines a forestry use. For the purposes of your zoning or your future land use map, you could choose a different definition of forestry if you wanted. Bristol could choose a different definition of forestry if it chose to.
Can we keep the one we have, or does it go to the one that we adopt and then we have to pass our own version of it?
You can keep the one you have.
Okay, second question, thank you. Second question is, if a map more or less like this, the one that's up on the screen now with these zones defined, were to be in effect, the state obviously sees that there are advantages or it would help housing or development. And I just wonder, what would you anticipate the sort of practical, like proposals we'd be getting that might be different from what we're getting now as a consequence of a map like this and its effect regarding Act 250.
Okay, so presuming if I assume that Bristol opts into the tier 1B area, so the pink area that is your village. Anybody who wants to develop more than 10 units of housing. Will absolutely do it in your village area first. You might still see some people developing small developments in the rural general area, but anybody that's doing more than 10 will absolutely go to your village area to save time and money and reduce their risk. So if there, I do believe it will drive at least larger housing developments into your village. And they, so they will, then anybody looking to develop housing units will be choosing between Bristol Village and the villages in the draft future land use area villages in other towns. Because, as economic animals, people trying to make a dollar building housing, they're going to avoid Act 250.
Thank you.
Bill, you want to try it again?
Well, I'll do both. First, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll send the chat through anyhow. Part of my question. The pink area, the far eastern portion, is on very steep land.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we had drawn the boundary line for the zones through some of those properties, because we didn't want to include the steep land.
Mm-hmm. So the answer is if the Bristol Planning Commission gave me that rationale and said we would like you to draw that village area on our eastern village boundary consistent with our current village area. I'm almost certain we would do that. Actually, I can guarantee you we do that.
Mm-hmm. And then I'd like you to expand upon your answer to Fred about the former Casella landfill. Could you tell me more about what the implication of the pink designation is for that land? Because that's landfill.
Right. So I am certain that even though that landfill is closed, there are conditions on its redevelopment from A&R. I know that, for example, they still have had to do testing for a long time to make sure that there aren't contaminants leaching out of it. And I expect, I haven't read it and I don't know very much about that landfill, but I expect there are things they can do on it and things they can't do on it. This jurisdiction basically just relieves housing in the village area if Bristol chooses to opt in from Act 250. It doesn't change any other state level permits that landfill might be subject to.
Okay. But do I understand correctly? Apart from those other A&R permits, there would be no Act 250 review of that?
No. Well, go ahead. Can finish your question.
If there were a proposal to develop that landfill involving some kind of housing, perhaps for a density bonus or something like that.
So if someone proposed housing on that landfill, it would still be subject to your local zoning. It would still be subject to basically whatever state permits were required. And it would still be subject to whatever covenants are on that land when they closed it. I don't know what the closing agreement of the landfill said.
Yeah.
So it would be still subject to those. It would, like every other place in the village, it would not be subject to Act 250.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for if it were developed for housing.
Well, I don't anticipate that it would ever be developed for housing a la Love Canal. But what I do think is possible is it might be included with another property for purposes of gaining density, additional density.
Okay, and they would leave that area open as a playing field for, could put solar fields on it or something like that. I think that's theoretically possible, Bill. Again, I'm not that familiar with that property though, and the covenants that are on it and what they say, so.
Okay. Well, fair enough, Adam. I just wanted to raise some questions. Now, my other set of questions have to do with naturally with the tier 3. And you mentioned 3 different types of 3 different sources of limitation of restriction. One had to do with headwaters.
Correct.
So let's consider that one first. What kind of a boundary is there around the headwater or perceived headwaters presumably for a river? Does that include the tributaries to the river, and how many
Yes.
acres are we talking about?
It's primarily the tributaries, so it's the very small tributaries to the river. I think headwaters are drain areas less than 2 square miles. So think of very small streams that are currently not regulated by ANR. I think they are also, but they're not looking at every single headwater because that would cover most of the state of Vermont as well. All the streams, all the streams start somewhere. So I expect they will limit the headwaters to areas where there are steep slopes. And they talked about 35% in at least one meeting. These things are all draft and they're not final till the LURB approves them, the Land Use Review Board approves them, and then it goes through a legislative LCAR process. So it's a long way from being done. So take everything that I tell you as kind of a crystal ball or with a grain of salt, but it's what the committee that's discussing it is talking about. So steep slopes, soils that do not retain water well. So basically shallow to bedrock or other soils that don't retain water well. And basically an elevation, it'll be greater than probably 1,000 or 1,200 feet. It might be greater than that. I don't know the answer, but it'll be higher elevations. But not all the way up to the 2,500 foot line of elevation like it currently exists. Does that help?
Well, it might also be a source of enormous alarm. What percentage of the forest land do you think that would comprise?
I don't know. It, logging and agricultural are still exempt from Act 250. But I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, Bill. I haven't seen a map of these proposed areas. They're just talking about the potential areas for tier 3 right now. and I'm not sure, they're starting to map the other two, the habitat areas. Um, the second one was basically, tier, or,
The S1 through S3, or was it S1 and S2?
S1 and S2, so those are categories of natural communities.
Mm-hmm.
That are rare or extremely rare.
And some people's idea of what's rare can be highly subjective. Do you have preliminary estimates as to how much land would be included in the S1 and S2?
A&R might, I do not know what it is yet.
They'll
But
be given it to your working group.
if you looked at S1 and S2, I tell you, they're generally smaller communities, smaller land area communities, but I'm a little out of my depth as far as telling you what all those communities look like, and I haven't seen that map either. They put it up on screen at a meeting earlier today, but I really haven't had a chance to look at it, and on a statewide basis, I can't tell you.
Uh-huh. And then the habitat issues.
Basically state habitat corridors of statewide significance. So generally connecting larger blocks of habitat, so forests or swamps.
Mm-hmm.
Forests or wetlands.
Well, I suppose my general comment is there's still a lot of selective judgment involved in these designations. And there's no question that as land gets designated for something that is considered worth designating, there will be more restrictions on how it can be used, not just for general purposes, but even for, despite the passion denials, even for forestry and farming. The reality will be that will come. And there's some talk that if you used a very general definition of the tier 3, it could include as much as 90% of the state of Vermont with some kind of additional restriction beyond what there is today. And that naturally would be a concern to the people who own that property, which is many farmers, many woodland owners throughout the state.
Yeah, and they are represented on that working group. There are both ag and forestry representatives there. I will tell you, they're not doing forest blocks in and of themselves specifically, or ag soils for that matter, in tier 3. Primarily because of the concerns you just expressed.
Mm-hmm. Now, what did you mean by a 1,000-foot elevation being a?
They're looking at higher altitude headwaters, so
so above 1,000.
Above 1,000, maybe above. They haven't set the number exactly. It'll be 1,000, 1,200, 1,500. I'm not sure where it will land.
So then it becomes a question of just how much surrounding land is included. And as you were suggesting earlier, at certain times of the year, if you include all the streams and other tributaries, that alone would cover most all of Vermont, at least the wooded areas. And I think a lot of the farming areas too. So I think there's a lot to be decided. is my conclusion. And I do hope that the representatives of agriculture and forestry on this working group are bearing in mind the implications for the people who earn their living from this land. Because most of them have plenty of restrictions on them already and aren't really looking for any more. Okay, thank you, Adam.
There was there was a question in the chat a little bit ago.
Who is that?
Mick, who I
Michelle Pearly.
oh,
Oh,
thank you. I was like, who the heck is Mick? Michelle Pearly asked, the enterprise section, why is Livingston business area not in the area and the machine shop down the road not included in the enterprise? So that would be
the commercial district.
Yep.
Just south, so
You talked about it before.
the southwest corner of 116 intersection with 116.
Southwest with 17?
Yep.
116 with 17.
Yep. Correct.
Well, it's currently in your rural ag 5 district. It's not in your commercial district.
right,
Yeah.
it'd be
So
just
Hewitt
over
Road.
here, that kind of
Oh,
things living so much.
okay. Between Hewitt Road and 116, east of 116. It's a good question. Well, no, it's included in the village area.
Oh, I meant west.
West is. Yeah, the west side is in the 5. Rural agriculture.
Well, there's some of it, there are, it looks like probably 10 parcels or so.
Yeah.
On the west side that fall into your commercial zone. And they're not necessarily included in your village district or in an enterprise area here on this map. So it's a valid question. If that was something that you wanted us to change, I would suggest you ask.
I would think that we will want to deliberate on this a little bit, and that would be one question that we would ask.
I think one thing I think you can inquire about, Adam, is getting back to that landfill question. I find it hard to believe that the State Department of whatever it is for landfills and whatever would say, no, you know, you got to keep that in Act 250, or maybe it has a special designation, but I doubt very much if we could include it in this pink area. So that if someone looked at this map from Westport, New York, and they were thinking of building 50 units, and they say, this is perfect, maybe something like that, I would not want to mislead people.
Okay, I understand. We kind of followed your village area, but if that's something that all of you want us to pull out of the village area, and I'm not sure what exactly we do with it, but
And
But
again, and that would get to the state regs, I would think. Can a landfill ever be built on? I would imagine it could be after whatever the people with wisdom in this determine is enough time for things to have perked through, or whatever the case might be, depending upon the cap too that's used. I don't remember. I don't know that they used impermeable thing for a cap, or whether it was soil, it's clay and the like. I don't recall.
yeah,
It just was a big landfill. There's a lot of stuff in it. And I'd hate to encourage anyone, you know, in terms of the usage there.
I think somebody probably figured that out pretty quickly, and if you're gonna invest a lot of money in housing development, it's probably not gonna be your first choice.
Any other questions for Adam? I guess there's been whisperings amongst this commission about the village planning area, which I don't think anybody will dispute is a desirable growth area. But a lot of these little yellow areas are, what did you call those yellow?
Rural general?
Rural general, where there is development.
Mhm.
That it, whether it makes sense to develop or allow a greater development in some of those, or to build onto some of those areas as an alternative to the density that is permitted in the village planning area, because given the reality is there's only so much you can develop in this village planning.
So there are something there in the methodology and the 10 things that the regional planning commissions are using, there is something called a hamlet. I guess I'd say take a look at a hamlet. It generally does not, it's an area of historic kind of housing development, but it generally doesn't have the same level of infrastructure that a village does. It doesn't have as many commercial units. It might have one store, for example, or some type of civic building. If Bristol wanted to, name one or two of the outlying areas of development as a type of hamlet, that's certainly possible. It doesn't change Act 250 jurisdiction. So the 1B designation is still gonna go to the main village. And I'm not sure that any of these other areas have enough infrastructure or commercial buildings or things to merit being called another village.
Okay.
But you could try and convince me that I'm wrong if you all, the planning commission, felt strongly about that.
I have some experience with Act 250, having been the head of it for Addison County for a number of years. And my experience with it is that the process can be very clean, it can be very expeditious and not onerous. Every single, save one, went that way. The issue often becomes a party or four that don't like it, often for aesthetic reasons and the like. And they can prolong, not necessarily stop, but prolong the process and make it much more expensive. If the Act 250 is no longer applicable based on this, does that remove people's access to put forward lawsuits and the like to try to prevent a project? Or do they still have that as a recourse in just through a different way?
They still have it as a recourse through local zoning. They could oppose a project basically through your zoning subdivision process.
Does that happen often?
It can.
Be like the DRB hearings, right? For the major subdivisions or PUDs. I'm imagining it would be projects of that scale would most likely be in that category.
Absolutely.
So it would be before the DRB.
I'm certainly not approving 50 units of housing. I'm not doing that.
Well, 50 units of housing where we don't have water and sewer and all would certainly take special conditions or them creating their own sewer system like we did in downtown, which would mean they probably would go ahead and do it in Bridgends or in Middlebury, where there was more infrastructure available to them if cost was the main issue. I would say that would be a big deal. Plus, when it comes to apartment units, not necessarily single family homes, but in a sense, when it comes to apartment units, the only development that's occurring from private enterprise is market rate housing. It's apartments that are more costly because they need that in order to afford to be able to build a project. And the projects that are designed for people that are less than median income and very much less than the median income. As far as I'm aware, they're all subsidized by federal and state programs. And so what kind of housing might get developed in a situation like Bristol, I would imagine would be more the market rate housing. The one exception, but we have water, if nothing else, was the Firehouse Project. And the agency that I'm a commissioner on, the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, and probably 5 or 7 others are all involved in the funding for that project. And it's a very different beast, perpetually affordable stuff, and a lot of rules and regs, and they're unique. And so what kind of housing you would get would be interesting. But I think if it was market rate driven, it would be basically middle to upper middle income and above, because that's what's getting built by the developers, so they can make a buck.
Yeah, and you know, another scenario that we can contemplate, not that it will happen, but you guys laid out a couple scenarios, how will we see housing? Another valid scenario under current zoning and future zoning is commercial interests come in, buy up several contiguous single family homes and develop that as one development. That is going on all over the country. Hasn't really reached Vermont as far as I know, at least this county as far as I know, maybe Chittenden County or whatever, but that is a trend nationally. So that's conceivable as a scenario. And we should consider that while we consider other scenarios too.
Okay, so without any other questions, we'll wrap up the future land use mapping conversation and.
Can I ask a quick question, Kevin? I'm sorry.
Sure, we'll go right ahead.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around all the complexities and playing catch up. But if Bristol were to do the T1B exemption from 250, which allows up to 50 units, right? I understand that correct?
Yeah.
And I know this is going to transition into our next conversation, but is an AUD a unit or is a unit a new building? Which also could be
I
an
could
AUD,
tell
a
you,
new lot.
an ADU is a unit.
Or sorry, ADU, sorry.
It's
Okay.
a house unit.
Okay. Thank you.
I have one question, but you were also talking about septic and sewer, and I want to get this straight. You said sewer, but you also said one time that like if somebody came into a field or something, put 50 houses that had good soil, that was also okay. It doesn't have to have a sewer system.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And that's where how good does the soil need to be? There's a little wiggle room in that
Yeah.
guideline.
Bristol has it if it is
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so with that, thank you, Adam, for that. We've got,
Okay.
I believe.
I had a question. I'm sorry, I couldn't the mute off fast enough. I just had, if we wanted to request that you would make changes to this, like what someone was talking about on the high, it was so steep in the parcels, and we went. When do we need to get that to you or to the committee?
Well, I would like it sooner rather than later, but you all need some time to look at it and talk about it. So, you know, if I were to say the end of August, ask for that.
That's one meeting.
2026.
That's
25. Or do you only have one meeting a month?
Yes.
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, September would be better.
Okay, well, you could get it to me in September and that would be fine. I do need to knit something together to have a regional map so I can do some other work. It'll be a draft. So I may knit some things together between now and then, knowing it's not set in stone. It will be a draft. If you get me something in September, we'll amend everything.
Thanks.
So, yeah, that was my closing statement or question is we've got homework, which I believe is to review this map. Would it help you if we give you an interim opinion in August and a second or more formal opinion in September, or?
If you wanna ask me questions that I can respond to, what do you think about this change? You know, this change, and I can say, yeah, I
Okay.
think that would work. I think that would work within the methodology, or no, I don't believe that would work in the methodology, and here's why. That would probably be a better way to go about it. And then hopefully we could get to a final in September.
Okay,
And you guys did not get the methodology paperwork. That was on my bad. I will send it out.
Makes me feel better for not reading it.
No, it did not get into your packets.
great, thank you. So the other discussion item is, there's been some recent discussion on our favorite subject, ADUs. And so, we had, I'll read this, that's maybe the best way to say it, and then it'll hopefully frame what we should be talking about, because we have, in a nutshell, we have some, we need to better understand how the state statute relates to our zoning reg, relates to how we're administering our zoning regs. So the concern of multiple members at the May 20th meeting is driving this agenda item to review and understand 4412 as it applies to the town unified development regulations, the accessory dwelling units in section 404. The concern was that the 20-foot setback behind the principal structure for a new accessory structure in the UDR section 404 was not used due to an opinion that the language of 4412 requires the specific dimensional values in the dimensional standards for the primary structure to take precedence. Then there is pulled out the definitions, applicable definitions from state statute, the state statute section on ADUs. Pulled out section 404 of the accessory dwelling unit. So the discussion needs to be limited to review, analysis, and understanding of 4412 as it relates to the current town UDR. This is not a conversation to consider or debate changes to the UDR other than legal conflicts identified. As such, it is expected that all are respectful of the limitations to keep the conversation to the specific questions raised. It may seem unprofessional, but off topic or repeated points will be cut short. And I had sent out a few questions and asked for input and ended up with a few more questions. There were some questions derived from our last meeting. So there are 7 questions, if you will, listed on the 3rd page that it appears that we should be talking about and going through and trying to clarify where we're at and understand how we're administering ADUs with respect to 4412. The first question is, which ruling governs for ADU duplex when there is an existing permit in place for a PUD or subdivision, whether it is local or state, like Act 250? Some have conditions like 1 single family home per lot. Also, what restrictions, if any, can an HOA impose? So I guess the question is what takes precedence?
So what's the HOA again?
Homeowners
Oh.
Association. Sorry about that.
Nothing wrong with that very often. Okay, there you go.
So I would. The statute, which, and basically statutes take precedence over local law. So the state has the ability to dictate what local municipalities include in their regulations. And this statute in particular required provisions and prohibited effects, 4412. The state is saying pretty clearly to its municipalities that it wants ADUs to be able to be developed. It's, and I would say it's any ADU, it's a new ADU as a new structure, or it's an ADU in an existing structure. But they want to promote, the purpose of the statute is to promote ADUs and to restrict basically municipalities from regulating them with some small exceptions. So
By regulating them, you mean, no, we don't want it?
restricting them further than you would restrict, yeah, you can't say, no, we don't want it. It basically says that if you allow a single family house, you've got to allow an ADU.
Can we allow a single family house and say, yes, we allow an ADU, but the ADU, when there's already an existing single family house on a small lot, can only be so big?
Yes, only so big, but it can't be smaller than 900 square feet.
Right.
Right,
That's what a current rule is.
yes. Yes, so you can restrict the size of it, or on the restriction is 900 square feet. Could be bigger if you wanted to let it to be, it doesn't have to be. But basically it can't be more restrictive than the regulations on the single family. Than you put on single family houses.
Okay, so, well, I was trying to get clarification on this. So if there's an existing, say, Act 250 permit in place.
Yep.
That stipulates as one of the criteria that each lot shall only be used to develop a single family home.
Mhm.
Is that no longer the limiting factor, and those single family homes can now add an ADU?
Okay, I would say that the homeowner, the applicant, or the homeowner, the person that owns the land, would need to go to Act 250 and get either a jurisdictional opinion or an amendment. I do not know whether Act 250 would say, yes, we recognize this statute here and it applies to our developments and we don't need to amend the Act 250 permit, you can just do it. Or if they would say, we recognize the statute is in effect, we're gonna, but you still need to go through Act 250 to do it. I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, so there's been no.
But
If I can
Do you?
offer some insight, there was an ADU that was approved before I started, up off Wildflower Lane off Hardscrabble. That area is under Act 250. They had to get an administrative amendment, a minor amendment to the Act 250 permit for the construction of the ADU. So I would say it depends on the Act 250 permit and the jurisdictional opinion from Act 250, but it would be up to the homeowner to work with Act 250.
Okay, so far there's been no precedent set that this supersedes any existing permit. That was,
Yeah,
I think, the general question.
yeah. I haven't seen anything like that. I've seen having it permanent amendments with Act 250 for an ADU, but I haven't seen anything that supersedes.
not aware of it, and the statute doesn't speak to what a homeowners association can do. So a lot of different, bigger subdivisions have bylaws and covenants and restrictions on them. I'm not aware of any specific statute saying that you can't, your homeowners association can't do it, but it wouldn't surprise me if someone found one. But I haven't seen it. I don't know the answer to that question, I guess is the best way for me to answer it.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments about that question? So the next question is, oh,
Can you,
Bill,
yes, thanks, Kevin. Naturally, I don't know the specific legal research, but it would seem to me that if the homeowners association restricted the development of a lot, it would be equivalent to a covenant on that property, that had been placed by a previous owner or in the process of selling it to the current owner. In which case it would probably have some force of contract law.
Agreed.
Okay. Next point is, does an existing non-conforming use disqualify a single-family house from being able to add an ADU, such as in a zone where residential uses are not allowed but are pre-existing?
So I think in Bristol, in your regulations, you say that ADUs are allowed in all districts in the specific regulation. So I would say that language seems pretty clear to me, and that they would be allowed.
If you took that sentence out of our regulations.
Let me go back up to the statute. And I think it says, except the flood area adopted, no bylaw shall have the effect of excluding as permitted one single accessory dwelling unit that is located within or pertinent to a family dwelling unit. Blah. Bylaw shall single family dwelling unit. So, if I read the bylaw shall require. No, I want to go to the other one. No bylaw shall have the effect of excluding as a permitted use one accessory dwelling unit that is located within or pertinent to a single family dwelling on an owner occupied lot, period. So I tell you, if it exists, they can have an ADU.
Yeah.
That's how I'd read that.
Even though it's no longer a permitted use in that district.
Even though it's no longer a permitted use in that district, because the state statute takes precedence over basically your bylaws.
Any further question or discussion about that one, John?
Yes, I just want to point out, I think we need to be a little more careful when we read this and how we read this language. In particular, I'm looking at 4412 section state statute that's in your memo there. Let me say it in plain language and then read it in this legalese. But the person getting the permit is the homeowner for the primary property, and they're getting a permit to add this ADU, right? It's not straight to the ADU. The ADU is not a separate building that gets a permit separate from the owner of the property, right? So a bylaw, this is now reading the state statute. A bylaw shall require a single family dwelling with an accessory dwelling unit to be subject to the same review, dimensional, other controls as required for a single family dwelling without an accessory dwelling unit. Nothing in that language says that the ADU is permitted on its own. It goes with the property there, right? So I think that careful reading of that passage helps to maybe decide us, because every single family home is subject to rules, for example, about an accessory structure. That's perfectly fine, right? Everybody, if they want to build a garage, they got some rules to live by. And that to me is equal treatment. And I also don't see anything in the law that requires us to weigh ADUs. Like if you add an ADU to a single family house as an addition or part of the existing house, you turn it into an ADU. That doesn't eliminate that use as a single family house. It adds the ADU use, but it doesn't trump the single family use. That's still two uses there. The state is just saying you can't ban ADUs, which nobody here in Bristol wants to do. I think that's an easy consensus on this board. I think we want ADUs. Anyway, I just point out that in some of our discussion, it's as if we're discussing permitting the ADU period. It's not that. We're permitting the single family home owner and the dwelling to add this use, a second use. And I think that might matter as we deliberate this. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, so let's talk about item, issue 3. For the term criteria in 4212, 4412. Do the specific dimensional standard values for a single family dwelling unit or the parameters referenced, review dimensional or other controls apply to the structure, single family or accessory being reviewed, be the basis of review?
I would say the answer is yes. That basically you need to apply the same dimensional standards to the ADU as you apply to the single family home. So when we wrote your zoning, 3 or 4 years ago at this point, I think, the statute was a little different. It didn't necessarily have this in it, and AZ pointed this out to me, which made me feel a little better, because I put in some of the dimensional restrictions as a way to try and make the ADU clearly subordinate to the single family house, because of some of the issues that you'd had in Bristol. So it was a way to allow it, but to try and control its scope, scale, size. The statute changed, and I don't believe it allows that anymore. I think it's pretty clear that the dimensional standards that you apply to a house need to apply. You also need to apply to an ADU.
That is not at all clear, and it's not in the plain language of the statute that we just.
I absolutely believe it is, John, but you are absolutely welcome to disagree with me.
I do disagree, but I just don't see it in the plain language. Look at it again. It talks about the house. All the houses are subject, all the single family homes are subject to the same rule in Bristol about these accessory structures. That seems fair to me. It says that you have to treat the property owner of the house and the permit the same as you would a house without an ADU. It doesn't say you treat the ADU as a separate house. Where is that language, Adam?
I would say a bylaw shall require a single family dwelling with an accessory dwelling unit to be subject to the same review, dimensional or other controls as required for the single family dwelling without an accessory dwelling unit.
And that's what we're doing. That every house is subject to the setback, say, or that it must be, clearly subordinate. Every house is subject to that. It's totally fair.
I would say the ADU needs to be treated the same as have the same dimensional standards as another single family house. And therefore, it's subject to your setback regs, but you can't make it subject to greater setback regs, for example.
I would ask you, and I'll stop with this, but please show us the language in the statute that says an ADU is tantamount to a single family home. It doesn't say that. In fact, it says something quite different right in front of us here in Kevin's memo. Thank you. But show us where it says that.
I thought I just read it to you, John. The way I read that is the language I just read to you.
Where are you getting that from?
That's from the statute.
So yeah, previous.
Here.
Like 4 line down.
The state one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the state statute.
Actually, I think I see it like John, it's like, it should be subject to setbacks, it can be subject to everything that a house, single family dwelling is subject to.
Correct.
That house is subject to a certain setback, correct?
Correct.
And so, it never says it has to be the exact same figure, but it can be, subject to it even says, it is
Shall be subject to
the
the
same review.
dimensional or other controls as required for a single family
And
dwelling.
single family dwellings, dimensions are controlled, it can't be too big. Same with the setback, same with, I should say, the ADU, has to be a certain size, it doesn't say the same size. It doesn't have the same, it doesn't say that, it really doesn't say that. To me.
Well, that's how I read it, as basically, you can have setbacks. But this, you've got to apply the same setbacks to your ADU as you do to a house without an ADU.
I don't see it.
So my concern is
Very liberal of you, Adam.
if you
Well,
look
the
at,
purpose of the statute is to promote ADU adoption and to restrict the town's ability to basically further restrict them.
And
So
nobody here has proposed that. In fact, we've spent lots of time with your help, thank
Yeah.
you, trying to propose and advocate for ADU. So nobody here is talking about it.
so I was in the process of making a point, John. So if you look at the definition for criteria,
Mhm.
it has, and I can't remember off the top of my head, criteria is more the parameters, if you will, not necessarily specific values. So my quandary is in the first sentence, they lay out criteria, which was where am I? Review dimensional and controls. So they set out these controls to look at, and they reference a single family dwelling with those controls or criteria. Then they specifically use the term criteria for a detached non-residential building. So to me, and we have an anomaly here that our detached, I'll say it for
accessory building.
accessory building has a different set of setback requirements than the primary unit does. And by saying that you can't take the criteria that are in the dimensional standards in our zoning regulations and evaluate that accessory structure, you end up with a different set of values to evaluate that accessory structure that put it out of compliance if you change the criteria that you're evaluating that structure just because you're adding ADU to it.
I think I understand what you're saying, Kevin. Basically, your accessory structures, your side yard setbacks can be closer to a fence than your main structure, I believe.
And there's a requirement for setback from the face of a primary building as well.
Yeah. So if somebody had already built an accessory dwelling according to the rules, right, and then wanted to put in an ADU in it, they'd be closer to the side yard setback if you allowed it than if they built the ADU from scratch according to your your primary dwelling setbacks.
But not if it was an ADU and a new or renovated accessory structure. That's two uses. The ADU does not make the first disappear.
John, can you let Adam finish?
I thought he was. I apologize if you weren't.
So I agree with that, John. I don't think just because you put an if you build an accessory structure, then I think you need to meet the setbacks for an accessory structure, regardless of whether you put an ADU in it. So if you've got two uses in that accessory structure, you need to meet the most restrictive of the setbacks.
Yeah, well, we don't have that regulation on the books anymore because you and Chris removed that half of the.
John, we're not going there.
But I'm just saying, that's what.
No, we're not going there, John.
That is what used to deal with this problem when we ran into these two uses.
John, we're not going there.
And Adam
That
said
is outside of this question.
Next time. But that's the problem.
So
Is 4303 here the state statute?
it is.
Some of the state statutes, yes.
Okay, so that, to me, that helps the understanding. Because it does say an accessory dwelling unit must be distinct and clearly subordinate to a single family dwelling. Right? And has facilities, for independent and wastewater, and it cannot exceed, and it's either 30% of the primary or 900 feet, whichever is bigger.
Mhm.
So it's not treated like the single family unit
Different
by
numbers.
definition, because it defines it in a very different fashion.
I
Than what,
would say.
than what that last sentence of 4112 says,
Or 4412.
4412. For the
Well,
conversion.
what do you make of
existing detached
4212?
residential. I'm confused with that. I don't, it says, you know, you can't treat the accessory dwelling unit any more restrictive than a single family dwelling without an accessory. Well, it says the definition of an accessory dwelling unit is very different.
Um,
Actually, Fred, that's not what it says. You left off some words.
Ah, excuse us, Joe.
Well,
I might have left off the word,
But
but
that's
I
not what it
wasn't
says.
trying to get into every word.
Let everybody have the conversation, please.
I have been sitting patiently and listening. Fred's had the floor quite a bit, and I'm just pointing out that what Fred just stated as fact is in fact not fact. I thought that might be interesting to the rest of you.
so. The statute does allow it. Basically, under 4303 does say that an accessory dwelling is gonna be smaller,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And subordinate.
And subordinate, and that's what we tried to hang our hat on with the language that we developed for Bristol's bylaws when we said, you know, it's gonna be set back a little further and it's gonna be its height's gonna be restricted. The statute was, I guess, was a little different then. It didn't necessarily make the reference to these dimensional standards, but you know, you don't have to agree.
They didn't
with
change
me.
the definition either, did they?
They actually, so what
They
they,
changed it some. If you go back to.
Well, if this is the definition,
It changed from previous legislation.
but this is the current definition.
This is the current definition, absolutely. I think you need, so as I read this, you need to apply your dimensional standards. And it uses dimensional standards for other controls required for a single family dwelling. In the same manner. So I guess I'd also say, I think AZ's gotten an opinion from the town's attorney.
yes,
That's similar to that, so I don't know if she's, I shouldn't.
yeah,
Yeah, I read that and there was some fluff there from my point of view. but-
yeah, you wanted further clarification from
Dimensional
Jim.
standard is a general term.
Yeah.
That's all. I mean, it's just a general term to use it. Yes, there's a dimensional standard for the
I'd
single
say
family
your
dwelling.
setbacks are dimensional standards.
And we could choose dimensional standards for housing, single family housing. We choose that.
Right,
And exactly the same, it seems to me, we get to choose dimensional standards for the ADU.
as long as they're not more restrictive than the dimensional standard for the single family dwelling is how I would put it.
But what's restrictive about any of this? I just don't.
So it goes back to your original question, Slim, you can put an accessory structure in line with the face of a primary structure if it's an ADU.
Say that again?
Two different things, an ADU and
Wait, I need to hear this, John.
different things. They're not the same.
So your original question that started this whole conversation was an new accessory
An
structure
accessory structure.
was permitted that was brought forward from the, is it 20 or 40-foot setback? 20, the standard 20-foot setback for accessory structure because it was permitted for an ADU. So I mean, that's really what the question is if we consider using the same criteria, that new accessory structure or any accessory structure existing can be more
Hold on.
prominent
Yeah.
than what we had originally intended.
It can be at the same setback as your
Yeah.
single family, yes.
So
But when I was saying more prominent than our desired setback of 20 feet.
Right, how you tried to make it subordinate,
Yeah.
yes.
So there's obviously some gray area and a lot of interpretation of some of these words. When it says with, it doesn't necessarily say attached to or inside. Other controls doesn't necessarily mean that a home with an accessory structure would count the same criteria as a detached accessory dwelling, except that sort of stuff. So is there any chance of any clarifying documentation or anything else from the state on this statute forthcoming? Or is that more wishful thinking than closing this up tonight?
Somebody may sue somebody and you may get a court case.
Okay.
Decides it. You know, given the purpose of the statute to allow ADUs,
Yeah.
I would read it conservatively and basically give ADUs more of a benefit of a doubt, and that was the advice I gave AZ.
Yeah.
So there's a board that word is just might as well take that. Cause you can put it right up front,
Well, you
can't just dimensions are dimensions, they make it just as big, right? But that is
you can restrict the size.
You can, let's-
You can restrict the size,
So there you go.
but I don't think you can impose greater dimensional restrictions. But I read it, I
We
read it the
just,
same.
like, by adjusting the size, we have, we put on.
But that's a specific exception in the statute,
Yes,
whereas the other
That's
are
what-
not necessarily.
Okay, so let's go to the next one. If the single family dimensional standards are used as criteria, we sort of talked about this, but for evaluating an existing or new accessory structure, does that create a more restrictive situation for the addition of an ADU into an accessory structure that is otherwise compliant? In other words, if
I think that's what we just talked about,
we
right?
kind of wrapped it in the other one, so if that accessory structure is closer to the property line than a primary structure, it's out of compliance, and you can't put an ADU in it.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to be Adam's reading. It seems like Adam would rule differently on that, Kevin. Adam would say the ADU trumps anything.
No, I wouldn't say an ADU trumps anything. So for a new ADU, that was also another accessory use, like a garage. I would say that they need to meet the, basically the setbacks for your non-resident, for your residential buildings. They've got to meet the more restrictive one. In an existing structure that is closer to the line, closer to the sideline than as allowed, it's an existing structure. I mean, you could certainly make people ask for a waiver to put an ADU in there. But I would not necessarily restrict them outright.
But you're saying a new structure needs to have the same setback at every border as the primary structure. The original or the existing.
A new ADU,
New built ADU.
a new built ADU should have the same setbacks as your primary residences, is what I've been saying.
That's restricted.
But why would you all of a sudden say an existing structure is okay then?
Because it's an existing structure.
But you're putting.
Infill with less impact.
Not
Yeah,
much.
but
It's
it
used to the
doesn't-
same.
Doesn't comply with,
Field plan,
I mean, I'm
From a building.
being the devil's advocate at this
Yeah.
point. Because it doesn't comply with the primary structure setback, so then it becomes, like you said, a waiver.
You can always make, if you choose to, you can always make your ADU regs more lenient than the single family.
And they used to be that with the language that you removed from them.
John, we're not going there.
Well, but Adam just raised the subject and they
No,
were more lenient. That's what I like. Like where the state regs would now say, oh, if it's already a duplex, you can't have an ADU.
No, John, we talked, we are not going
I would
there.
appreciate the respect of making a point. Thank you. Bristol's regs could allow, if somebody already has a duplex, if we found another mechanism, maybe we could be more lenient than the state. Instead of like the state saying, you're out, done, you can't have an ADU, end of story. We could say you could have an ADU if you went through a certain process where we made sure it fit in good on your already duplexed property. So
That'd be
I'm for
yeah,
that kind of
so we can
leniency.
still do that.
I like that, and we used to have it.
All right, then we can, yeah, like you said, maybe we'll do that.
Yeah, don't you guys know what those rules used to say? That language used to say, if you can't have an ADU because the rules we set eliminate you, like you're already a duplex.
And through the last bylaw deliberations, you had brought that up, we debated it, and we chose not to.
But the language would solve the problem we've been talking about all this time. This is exactly the point.
Thank you for your point, John.
I don't know why you guys are so invested in not understanding that.
So where were we? So
Question 4.
question 4, but I
No,
think we
question
finished that one, question 5. In 4412, there is no allowance for an ADU in a new non-residential building, accessory structure, only an existing one. Does the UDR section of 404 that allows an ADU in a new non-residential building include the specific requirements listed in section 404 result in a less restrictive condition than an ADU or an ADU than 4412? So 4412 basically talks about an existing non.
Well, I'd read 4412 as being agnostic as to whether it's a new building or in an existing building. Whether it's, I think, no bylaw shall have the effect of excluding as a permitted use one accessory dwelling unit that is located within or appurtenant. Appurtenant kind of means next to, near. A single family dwelling unit on an owner occupied lot. So I think it allows for both new appurtenant units, ones that are near, or ones that are within a structure.
Then it goes on to say further, the criteria for conversion of an existing detached non-residential building.
Yeah, that's, I think, Kevin, you're asking about a new build, like from the dirt up, right? And I think those are allowed, right, under the rules. And a conversion of a shop or a garage to an ADU, all good. The issue is when it's two uses. And we don't deal with that in our regs.
So putting two uses in an existing structure, like an accessory structure, like a garage and an ADU over the garage.
Right. And is it your position, Adam, that adding an ADU, say, on a second story above a workshop or a garage, then the workshop or the garage use, that accessory use, disappears as a regulatable thing?
No.
Okay, so how does Bristol's regs, as you understand them, deal with us, give us guidance on how we deal with that when it comes to the zoning board?
We're not, this is the zoning board.
Well, but I'm on the zoning board too, and AZ, you see this every day. So do you have the guidance you need when somebody comes and says, I want to have a workshop below and an ADU above?
I believe so, because the criteria for an ADU, you have to, there's the size criteria, you have to have the wastewater. In our regs, it's lesser bedrooms.
But why are you ignoring the accessory structure use? If it's a workshop or a garage on the ground floor and an ADU on top, that's not just an ADU. That's an accessory structure and an ADU.
So John, I think you're talking about question 7 now.
Well, it does kind of bleed together. I'll shut up till 7. But
Well, I mean,
I think that's still a good question. I would like an answer. Like, right? It's like when you add an ADU on top and they're still going to have a garage or workshop below, the ADU on top doesn't erase that first use, right? Or do you presume that it does?
No, I think it doesn't. I think you
I
have
asked
to.
that of AZ.
No, I like it's if someone was converting their garage or in their barn, they would still have a barn underneath, and that structure has to fit the accessory structure dimensional standards. A new ADU that is detached in a separate building that is being built, that to me follows the principal dimensional standards under the controls.
Do you mean a new building that's being built that has a garage on the ground floor and an ADU on?
No. That would if it's a new building, like Adam was saying earlier, if you're proposing to build a new building with a garage below and an ADU above, that building would have to follow the accessory structure setbacks because you're proposing an accessory structure with the ADU above it. And our accessory structure setbacks of 10 feet in most districts is less restrictive than the principal setback standards.
And Adam, it's not your position. I'm mistaken when I think it might be your position that adding the ADU on top of an accessory structure or accessory use is something that's regulatable because the statute is silent on that circumstance, correct?
You have to allow ADUs if you can.
Well, but when it's a combined use, the statute is silent. Is that correct?
The statute speaks to allowing accessory uses. There are lots of
No,
properties.
but that's not my question, Adam. Listen, I asked a very specific question. Is the statute silent when there are two uses? Like when it's a accessory use, a workshop or a garage below, and then you put an ADU on top. What does the statute say about that? I believe it says 0. And in statutory language reading, you always just read the plain language. You don't read into it. So if the statute doesn't say when you have a circumstance that's an ADU and on top of a new or existing workshop, here's how you deal with it. But the statute is silent on that. So for us to assume that by adding the ADU, it mutes, M-O-O-T, moots the accessory structure, the need to consider the impact of those two new uses on the neighbors, for example, is something that zoning is concerned with.
I never said that you did not have to get two permits, one for the accessory use that might be the garage and one for the accessory dwelling above it. I think you do. But I also think, yes, the statute does not anticipate every particular nuance of where an ADU might be or how it might be built. But
and that one is in particular, it's silent, correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
On that particular one, when you have two new uses, the statute is silent. It gives us zero guidance on how we deal with it, right? It doesn't tell us how to deal with it. It doesn't tell us how not to deal with it. So therefore, we may deal with it, right?
The statute doesn't tell you how to deal with them together. It doesn't anticipate every single nuance, but it clearly supports building an ADU, and I think you could do it.
But we're not talking about an ADU. We're talking about an ADU and an accessory use, two new uses. If we were just talking about a brand new building or an existing building converted to an ADU, just an ADU, then this conversation is unnecessary. We have an unregulated circumstance here.
Okay, and I think you agreed, so, okay.
And
Because the state didn't really deal with it directly.
it doesn't
You're-
deal with it directly, but I think there's a.
Well,
I
you
think
can have
you
your
read
thoughts,
into
you
the
have your
statute.
thoughts, call it this way. He agrees, it's not directly stated, very good.
So
Okay,
the
thank
permit would, you could have one permit with those two uses on it, right? The one application.
One application, I wanna get this use permitted, I wanna get this use permitted. And you'd have to permit both of them, they would both have to work.
And Bristol used to consider that as a higher prospective impact on the neighbors and therefore said, hey, if you're going to do that, you're going to add two new uses. Come talk to us.
Okay.
Fit in that
So-
additional use process.
So question 6 sort of became moot because we said that there was no acknowledgement that an ADU and a new structure was less restrictive. So I think we've gone through these questions. Is there any final questions or comments, Rob?
I want to circle back to number 2. I was just looking through the UDR in section 411 is nonconformities. And as part of that, it says any non-conforming use of the structure may be continued except shall not be moved, enlarged, altered, extended, reconstructed, restored, basically without approval by DRB and a public hearing. So if an ADU would have to go through that, if it was in, say, that condition of a non-residential zone.
So your regs also say ADUs are allowed in every district?
So that
And the
line
stat-
prompts the expanding a so are single family homes and duplexes, but that would expand a non-conforming use though, wouldn't it?
It would expand a non-conforming use.
So it would be
Yes.
allowed as long as it was approved through that.
I'm not sure. I guess I need to think about that, but because you specifically state, one, the statute wants to encourage ADUs. And you state that ADUs are allowed in every district. I want to try, the goal would be to harmonize your regulations. As to how we do that, I'm not, it might be sending them to a DRB hearing, but I'd have to think about it. I'm not sure.
Okay.
The one more for me, so that's still that setback thing, for example, are we sort of hearing from you that when somebody wants to build a new build ADU, that we have to treat it just like a primary residence, so we'll have to have that, let's say 40-foot setback from the side or the back, front and back and all that kind of stuff, like a new home would have to have.
I tell you that, yeah, they need to meet basically the dimensional, you can't make dimensional standards for an ADU more restrictive than they are for a single family home. And they also need to comply with your existing regulations.
Okay, so now just to put a nice bow on this, somebody wants to do the ADU plus a garage. Well, people are going to like build their garage with a tall ceiling, and then they're gonna come back and go, yeah, I wanna put an ADU in there. Because it's an existing structure. Well, that is just.
Loophole.
So, Don, I'm talking, that we're missing something there, because that is an easy loophole. Because if you're actually telling me that the setback for an ADU has to be the same as an existing, or I guess single family dwelling.
Wait,
Which we've never done that yet, right? We have given it the accessory or the accessory building setback, right, for an ADU?
the whole thing that started this was the Mountain Terrace ADU, that it was a
So-
detached ADU structure at the 40.
I don't wanna really talk, that's not the thing I'm envisioning. I'm envisioning the person who wants an ADU and a barn. They don't have any of these things. And they go, oh, I wanna build a barn or garage, and of course, oh, hey, 10-foot setback, that's all we need, right? And then they come along and go, I'm gonna put an ADU in that top ceiling, that top floor. And you go, no, you can't do that because it has to have the same setback as a single family dwelling, so you screwed, or you should have not put that there. Or are you gonna say, yeah.
People are already doing
Right.
that. People
John, okay, I'm talking.
going on, and Chris
So,
used to advise people to go ahead and build it, get it built as an accessory structure, and then come back in a month, and we'll give it the ADU thing
this
because
is what's happening.
already.
Okay, so
That's a
how
huge
can we,
loophole.
John, how can we rationalize this? It's absolutely nuts. That's what I think.
Okay, so they're getting it, they're gaming the system for 5 extra feet on their side yard setback.
Oh, I think it's more than that, isn't it?
No.
So the
10.
accessory is 10 and principal is 15.
On side yard.
Yep.
How about
For,
front yard?
for front yard, in the HC yard, it is 40 feet for a principal and 60 for an accessory.
And what's about the backyard?
Uh,
Principal dwelling,
15 and side yard and rear yard are the same and all that.
only 15.
Yeah.
Well, then we should make it 15 because this is technically does make a difference.
That might be a nice way
Structures
to.
are,
To solve that dilemma, Slim,
Yeah,
is make
keep
the
it.
accessories dwelling units be, or the accessory uses be also 15.
no, but then you can come in if you just have a shed, and then of course you'll get a variance or waiver rather, and they'll say, of course not, you can put it 5 feet away, and that's what happens, and that's fine. But it's not gonna be a big barn that they can put new built thing, you're gonna put a home in.
Yes, they can be.
10
Okay.
feet.
So Fred, have you got any
Fred?
questions, comments?
Who's gonna do that?
You got any questions, comments?
My only thought is that the language isn't necessarily precise so that an individual without a college education can understand what the hell's going on. And I think there could easily lead to some confusion. And, as long as our regulators understand what's going on, that might forestall problems developing. I read when they say the accessory unit can't have any more restrictions than the primary. Well, right off the definition challenges that, because an accessory dwelling can be no more than 900 square feet. Well, or a regular
30%.
unit can be significantly bigger than that. So, it's not clear as mud.
The state can make less
Absolutely.
restrictive, but it won't allow you to do it. The more
Absolutely.
restrictive, but won't allow you to do it.
And then with these variances, you can have something you think mapped out. And the applicant, or perhaps someone else a few years later, violates what the rule is. Because they don't know it, or they say they're not gonna come back and check. I only need 900, I'm gonna make the whole 1,800 square feet dwelling. And they could probably get away with it.
Or they probably can't. I mean, if they want to legally occupy their homes, they do need a certificate of compliance, which I go out and do, or the listers go out and do their appraisals.
I question
How'd they get that CFO on?
is followed. And I have practical experience.
So, yeah, I
People
think,
do come by though occasionally.
so to your point, Fred, I think my desire in this whole exercise, as painful as it is to come up with some sort of understanding. And I guess AZ and I'll work on this and present it next meeting. Come up with some sort of understanding about what Adam is advising us and what we've talked about. And try to make it more of a guideline than it is.
Good.
For whoever the
I think
BZA is.
that makes sense because it is not worded well. There can be a lot of
The
confusion.
legislature knows this stuff the best, dude. They would talk to somebody who wrote this thing. If I can that might encourage them.
Actually,
Developers wrote it.
one of our current representatives is on the housing committee,
Which one's that?
No,
Olson.
Okay.
Her.
Yeah, I know, Herb almost.
So, let's see, Shannon, have you got any
All right.
closing comments or questions? I lost her. Melissa? Bill?
Oh, no,
Sorry, I'm
sorry.
good.
Oh, okay. Shannon,
I'm good. I couldn't hit the button.
thank you. Bill?
Mute.
Bill, you're muted.
Please ask to unmute.
Yeah, I can only ask him. I can't do it for him.
Oh,
I think he's looking.
He's got.
okay, there you go. Oh, no, it's still the volume.
Still muted. There we go.
Sorry about that. No, I have nothing additional to say.
Okay, thank you, John.
Yeah, I would like, just for the thought exercise of it, to get a different opinion or, a second opinion on what the state statute, section 4412 means when it says a bylaw shall require a single family dwelling with an accessory dwelling unit to be subject to the same review, dimensional and other controls as required for a single family dwelling without an accessory dwelling unit. So I don't buy it that this rule means that we just treat every ADU like it's its own separate house application. The homeowners are applying for a permit to add a use to their property. That's what the zoning board reviews. That's how we look at prospective impacts. So I'll leave it there.
I'm not following you. Are you looking to get a second opinion on question 3, or you have a totally different question?
I'm not looking at question 3. I just disagree. I'm curious. I would like to be more informed on the interpretation of that section that I read earlier in 4412, because I don't believe that the state is requiring us to treat an ADU as a separate, it's not a separate permit from the, it's an addition to the homeowner's permit. We don't review it like it's a single family home. We look at the entire property that has a single family home and wants to add the ADU. That's how the zoning board would look at it. And that's how we do look at it, because the thing that interests the zoning board is prospective impact on neighbors. So we look at it from that perspective. And I don't agree with the interpretation, or I'm uninformed. So I would like more information about Adam's interpretation versus an alternative interpretation. That's all.
Okay,
I think
Yeah.
that sentence is less than clear. I agree with John on that.
I think it's perfectly clear.
Okay.
Well, yes, but it's less than clear to me, given what the definition is.
Well,
The unit
again,
must be an accessory dwelling must be a distinct unit that is clearly subordinate to the single family dwelling. Yet that last sentence in 4412 suggests something different in my mind's eye.
well, we are like a house that wants to have an ADU. We treat it just like any house that doesn't have an ADU. But it doesn't mean we ignore, like the setbacks, for example, in that one example. But
Right. Right.
okay, Ellen, any comments?
Yeah, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what the primary concern is here. So if I will say I'm a homeowner, obviously in Bristol, and my house was built in 1860. I don't know that it complies with all these things, but I have a separate detached 2-car garage that I've considered turning into an ADU. And I'm listening to this conversation and wondering, does that fit? If it doesn't follow the setback rules, does that mean I can't turn my ADU into housing? And I'm only using my home as an example to help me understand. I'm just, yeah, that's all.
Depends on if your barn is conforming to accessory setbacks.
So I think the question may be whether it's permitted versus needing to go for a waiver.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yes.
know that my property, my garage butts up against my property line by like 4 or 5 feet.
So that would be a pre-existing non-conformance, and 411 would come in there.
Oh,
Maybe.
I see.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I'm
Because-
just curious. I'm trying to like understand John's perspective and other people's perspectives because this is new to me.
Yeah.
And so I can only relate it to my personal experience right now. That's all. I'm just trying to understand what we're deciding on.
Yeah, fair.
Aren't we all?
Ooh.
We're deciding on understanding the rule.
Okay, so the
Right.
next,
I mean, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead, go right ahead.
Well, I'm just saying, like, if my property can accommodate the septic and the parking and the other pieces, like, how important is that setback rule for a pre-existing structure?
It's you have a pre-existing non-conformance, so at one point it either did meet the setback requirements, or it was built far before zoning was even a thing and there were setbacks. But now the setback requirement is 10 feet from the side yard. And if your barn is 5 feet, then that's a pre-existing non-conformance, and section 411 would come into play, where if you wanted to move, enlarge, alter, reconstruct, isn't that great off
Yeah.
off the top of my head?
Okay.
You would have to go to the DRB for a conditional use to build the ADU there. That's very clear to me.
Can I
Yeah.
ask one other clarifying question?
Absolutely.
Does this discussion center more around the vision we have for Bristol or the qualifying criteria for the money from the state to help people pay for ADUs?
Are you talking about the CHIP program?
I didn't know it as CHIP, but I know that there is a loan or grant program from the state. If you want to do an ADU, they do a portion of it. You have to contribute, like, I don't think 20%. and then he, I think it's grant
That's-
money, actually.
That's the VHIP program, that's grant money, they just say get the zoning from your town.
Okay, so you have to do zoning first. So we're really deciding on not access to that funding. We're deciding on what do we want Bristol to look and feel like. Okay,
And
thank you.
just for information, Ellen, if a homeowner goes that direction and gets a grant from the state, there are some restrictions put on how you can use it and for how long and what rent you can charge. I think that sort of
Right,
thing.
right. That's why I was asking, because if you access that money, it's supposed to be accessible to lower income families. Okay. Okay.
So I think that wraps up the discussion. There is an action item. I would. Do I need a motion to table it? I recommend tabling that, or can I just breeze over it? What's the mood?
I don't have the agenda in front of you. What's the action? What is it?
Action is interpretation of the ADU and statute, which I think
Should table.
table it. I would-
Motion to table any action on.
I second that.
okay. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? So I think AZ and I will work on a paragraph and we'll bring it back to hopefully a shorter discussion next month. Now we'll move on to administrative matters.
Thank you for your time and
Yeah,
thank you,
answers.
guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Discussion.
Yeah.
Whether
And-
towns had the same problem with it?
You guys are particularly sensitive to ADUs.
Nicely put.
We're also one of the few towns separates principal and accessory.
Structures.
Mhm.
That is a big
It has different
exception.
setbacks, yeah.
Yeah, which I
Well, thank you, Adam.
All right, thank you all.
For the presentation and persevering
Yeah.
on deliberations.
Got a paper map, you can display it how you want, if other people
Cool.
wanna come in and look at it, and I look forward to your responses.
Thank you.
thank you, Adam.
And hearing how you solve this one.
Okay, minutes. They were sent out with a packet. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at them.
They're pretty short.
Any questions
Very well.
about them?
move we accept.
Clarification, got a motion to accept?
I'll second it.
Slim's seconding, Fred motion, Slim's seconding. All those in favor of accepting them or discussion? John, oh,
He was.
I was voting.
okay, well, I forgot discussion. Okay, now it's the vote. All in favor, say aye or raise your
Aye.
hand.
Aye.
Anybody, if knows, if you're opposed or anybody abstaining?
I am. I wasn't there.
Okay, Melissa abstains. PZA zoning report.
Not a whole lot of permits, a lot of DRB cases. That's my report. Development review board.
And then we've got the report in the packet.
Yep. Yeah, that one got approved for that waiver. Man, it was a dicey one. It was dicey. No, you can actually see it at the very bottom there. Waiver was pending and so is the zoning. Right now, currently pending. A couple of these are pending. I actually granted this one today, so. Been granted, but
Okay, any other correspondence?
not missed correspondence.
Okay,
I do have the correspondence from Jim, but I was gonna hold off until I got further clarification from him.
okay. Any public comment? Do we have any public?
They've all deserted us now.
Seeing none, I'll move on to item 7. Adjournment. Who would entertain?
I'll move the adjourn.
Slim's moved.
Second.
And who seconded it? Melissa? All those in- Oh, Shannon, sorry.
Oh, Melissa was faster than me.
No. We'll let Carol figure out who. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Okay, thank you very much. Good meeting.